Hello and welcome to video 3 in the Pixel Studios Platformer Series tutorial. So in video 2 we left off on how to create a character and how to get it moving around the screen, and I mentioned collisions, which we will now get started on. To get your collisions working, first you're going to have to create a wall object sprite and also link that to a new object. Name them accordingly, and then once you have that started, you'll see I have here a new sprite and a new object named Object Wall Basic. All you have to do is drag and drop that onto your character instances layer. You can make a new object layer or instances layer. It won't matter. They'll still collide. It really doesn't matter for this tutorial. I'm going to use the same object layer, or you can also, with your object highlighted, click and hold Alt and drag, and it will create a line of your objects. It's very useful if you don't have it on a tile map or anything. It's the closest you can get to a tile map without having one. But for this, all you need to do is drag and then or get one on the screen and then click and drag the edges and you can make a wall. Since these collisions will be invisible in the end, you can just, you can do it like that instead of creating 50 different ones. Alright, so for our ceiling, just create a new one and drag the edge like the other ones. And for our floor, yeah. Such floor. Alright, so now if I press play, it should be the same thing as video 2. It'll be the character moving around the screen, it'll stop, it'll have the speed clamp, but it'll just go through the walls. So we have the basic setup started, but it's not colliding with the walls. So to get it starting to collide with the walls, you want to double click your object player sprite and you want to add these 2 lines of code. You use something called place meeting and you type it in like this. You say if place underscore meeting, and then once you do that, you can see it pops up down here. It needs an X, a Y, and an object you're colliding with. And when you use place meeting, it deals with the bounding box. So if you say X plus 1, excuse me, it'll check on the right side of the bounding box. If you say X minus 1, it'll check on the left. And the same goes for the Y, for the top and the bottom. Or if you don't add anything, I think it'll check both sides. So if you don't do X plus 1, it'll check on the left side and the right side. So if you want to check if there's a place meeting on all sides, you type in X comma Y comma obj wall basic. But what we're doing for this tutorial, since we want to check while it's moving, if there's something on the right or the left, we type in X plus 8 speed. And why this works is because 8 speed can also be positive or negative. So if it's positive, it'll check on the right side of the bounding box, and if it's negative, it'll check on the left side of the bounding box. And when that happens, if there's a collision true, we want to set the 8 speed equal to 0. So now that we have that, we can copy and paste that and replace this part with Y plus V speed. Okay. So if I press play now, we should have the most basic version of platformer collisions ready to go. Ah, majestic. It's beautiful. I could just do this all day. I love how you just type something in and then suddenly everything's different. All right. So they look perfect, but I'll change the speed, and you can see it sort of bounces. If you have your speed not perfectly even, and the computer does a calculation that doesn't give you a perfect pixel amount, I'm just gonna make it as uneven as possible. I set the clamp to a different odd number and the speed to an odd number. Usually you'll end up with a gap in between the walls. There's a small gap there that I saw. There it is again. Maybe I have to make it go a little bit faster. It's happening. Okay. You can barely see it there, but now there's a gap. There's a small black line in between the character. And just to make it more apparent, I'm going to change this. This worked last time I was making this tutorial and failed. change your clamp if you're typing it just like this tutorial to a higher amount, and you might start seeing that error. Yeah. Oh, it's okay. It's there, but I'm trying to make it really apparent. One, one last shot here. Okay, first try. That's great. Lady Luck is shining on me tonight. Um, you can see there's a large gap in between your character and the wall, and oh my gosh, yeah, it's just depending on how fast your character moving, you might not notice it, but eventually, after making so many practice projects, and you'll say, why is this happening? And that's why it's happening. It's because in our code we specified that we want the character to stop depending on our speed, but it's going to stop whether or not the object is 5 pixels away, whether it's 1 pixel away, or whether it's 20 pixels away. Because our object is going 50 meters per second at the maximum, it can stop at a range of anywhere from 1 to like 50 pixels. So if it doesn't have a precise calculation, it'll have that gap. So to fix that, you want to add these lines of code to your horizontal collision and your vertical collisions. So if it makes the thing stop, if it makes your character stop and sets your speed to 0, you need to add this line of code to make sure it adds 1 pixel if there's still no pixels, if there's nothing meeting to the right or left. So there's a situation that can happen where that's what you saw happening with the gap. It can detect a collision in the future, which is what this place meeting does. It detects if there's a collision 1 frame in the future, and if you don't have this extra collision code, it'll always just well, you're gonna want it. So there's a situation where obviously there can be pixels left. So to fix that, you type while not place meeting to say not. It's the opposite. I might have mentioned it in another tutorial. You use the exclamation mark and say while exclamation mark while not place meeting. So while the program makes it stop in the future 1 frame, if it's going 50 meters per second, 50 pixels. I'm just going to say meters for easy sake. And it makes it stop. If there's still a gap, while there's not a place meeting, x plus the sign of 8 speed, which will return a +1 or a -1, depending on what the horizontal speed is. So that's what that does. It's not a trigonometry function. It gives you a plus or -1. So you can use it with anything that has to deal with numbers like that. So if the program makes it stop, but there's still pixels left, 1 pixel to the left or the right. If it's moving to the right, it'll be x plus 1. If it's moving to the left, it'll be x minus 1, comma y. And if you do this about 10 times, you'll understand. This is how everyone does this. I haven't found any code that's better. This is how you do it. You want to add x. You want to add 1 pixel to the x coordinate. So we check if there's something on the bounding box, on the sides of the bounding box, and if there is, we add, this is calling the actual pivot point, not the bounding box. X equals x coordinate plus the sign of 8 speed. So that'll add 1 to the right or 1 to the left, depending on where it's going. So once you have that typed in, that is actually all you need to get your perfect pixel collisions working. And we'll just copy and paste that in and change it for the V speed. So it'll be y plus the sign of V speed. The sign of V. And then y equals y plus the sign of V speed. And if you want to clean it up a bit, you can. It's pretty clean. I mean, typing wise, usually people like indent or something. but that's doesn't make a difference code-wise. That should be everything you need. And I will add another line of code in the next tutorials. I will also, depending on uh, what's the word that has to do with preventing your character. Oh, I have to change the speed. Preventing your character from getting unstuck, because even if you have these pixel perfect collisions, once you start putting gravity in your game, your character can actually get stuck on a corner. You'll have pixel perfect collisions, but sometimes your character just gets stuck if it literally hits that pixel right on the corner. So in the next videos, I will add that. So now, if you typed in everything, I have this. I guess I should up the speed again at the end of this video just to show you that it can go fast now and not have those spaces. But you should have everything you need to start your pixel perfect collision platformer. All right, so let's do that. On a final note, Jenkins, it's time for ludicrous speed. All right, so we changed our clamp and changed our speed to go ludicrously fast. Now I do not believe those gaps should be there anymore. And no, they are not. So, as you can see, this is if your speed is not going faster than the width of your wall sprites, you should be fine. But there are exceptions if you're going even faster than this, where it will go through the wall sprite. Then I guess maybe you just got to turn your speed down, because this is already really fast, and it's gonna make people sick if I keep recording it. But yeah, those gaps are now gone, and that's all you really need to get yourself started besides gravity. And we'll add that in the next tutorial, and eventually also go over diagonal platforms once we have that started, because you can't use those unless you have gravity. And thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed these videos, please consider subscribing to my Patreon at www.patreon.com/inthepixel. And thank you very much. I will see you in the next tutorial.